Welcome to The Song of Roland, a podcast about culture in America. Lynn Stegner is the author of 4 novels, including the novel we're going to discuss today, which is called The Half-Life of Guilt. She's also the author of a collection of short stories and a triptych, which is a book of 3 short novellas. So I wanted to start with just by revealing to the listeners that you and I worked together on this book, which was just such a great experience. We met at a book festival in Missoula, and you were kind enough to agree to help with that project, which is called West of 98, where we asked a bunch of writers from all over the West to write about what it means to grow up here and write about it. And I'll always be grateful that we did that project together.
Yeah, and we met the whole tribe.
Right.
It was a fantastic experience, and I made lifelong friends, and I had people in my life who were acquaintances like Gary Snyder, but who then subsequently became a friend after that. And Jim Harrison and I got really close, and
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah. He
No,
said he
that's
was the
cool.
only person he would let edit his poems. So that was and then he did a
Yeah.
blurb for one of my books. And anyway, he I made good friends working on that project, and I learned a lot. I would never do it again.
Ah,
Uh,
no, it was a lot of work.
a
But
lot of
yeah,
work.
it's been interesting to me too. We were both disappointed, I think, in how the sales were, but almost everyone that I've had contact with that was involved in that says they really loved the book, the way it turned out. So that's nice.
Yeah, 67 writers. That's a lot of writers.
Yeah, I just contacted Terry Tepes Williams about doing a interview for this podcast, and she did the same thing. She said, "I know exactly where that book is on my shelf." So that was nice.
Good.
Yeah. So your new novel, Half-Life of Guilt, I really love this book, and I first wanted to talk to you about your connection with Wallace Stegner is pretty strong. You were married to his son, so you both managed to sort of weave environmental issues into your fiction, and I wonder if that was something you were interested in doing even before you met him, or did he have an influence on you that way?
I know. When I met him, I was clueless. I was in my 20s. I
Yeah.
was a typically self-absorbed 20-something-year-old. I also had a difficult childhood that I was struggling to get over, and I desperately wanted to be a normal person. And as much as I love, and I spend a ton of time in the wilderness now, and have for the last 4 decades, I didn't know anything about it when I met Paige or Wally. So
Mm,
that was definitely a wonderful interest by association.
okay. So did you guys talk a lot about that, or was it just sort of something you got by osmosis, or?
Oh no, we talked about it all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All the
Yeah.
time. And but both Paige and Wally wrote a lot about environmental issues with the completely different voices. Paige, one of the subtitles of Paige's book is A Curmudgeon at Large in the American West. And that describes Paige's writing about environmental issues and nature writing absolutely perfectly, because he was irreverent, he was
Mm,
rebellious, he was pessimistic, and Wally was the opposite. He was lawful, he was measured, and he was extremely respectful. And I think that's partly how the two of them staked out separate territories. Was they were both writers, but they adopted, or Walt Page adopted, a completely different narrative voice from his father.
yeah. So was it hard for him to be his son, even with that different approach?
Yeah, I mean they were absolutely engaged, involved with each other. They deeply loved each other, but Wally was ambitious and Paige was not ambitious.
Oh, really?
And Wally had extremely high expectations, because not only was he identified with his son, but he also felt, as most of us do, that our kids sort of represent us to a certain extent, represent us to the world. And so I think he did. It wasn't, I don't think it was easy in certain ways to be Wallace Stegner's son.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Where did you
remember Paige took a course from Wally at Stanford when he was there. Do you know this story?
remember? I think you might have told me though.
Yeah, he didn't, and it was a big one of those big courses, and they had assistant teachers, TAs or whatever. And the TAs, and Wally wanted to give Paige a B in the class. And all the TAs came and said, with all due respect, Dr. Stegner, your son really earned an A. We don't know why you're being so hard on him. And so I think he made it kind of hard to be, to meet standards. But
Yeah. Well, I would imagine a lot of his ambition came from the fact that he also had a pretty rugged childhood, right?
oh yeah, he had in certain ways some of the same rugged childhood or rough childhood that I did. He lived for grew up 7 years in Saskatchewan. My mother was from Saskatchewan. The very first day I met Wally at a lunch at their house, we both discovered quite accidentally that we had been in the same orphanage.
I remember
Uh,
you telling me that. That was
yeah.
so amazing. Was that
So
in Saskatchewan?
no, it was in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
Um, he and his brother were there 45 years before I and my brother were in the same place.
Wow. That's just such a wild coincidence.
Yeah. I mean, there were in those days, there was what was known as either economic or social orphans. With for some reason or another, the parents couldn't take care of you for a while. They parked you in this orphanage. And he was there for almost 2 years. I was there for almost 4 years.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Wow. So out of that, your experience as a kid came because a fire was in my head, right? I love that novel. Yeah, it was tough.
It's a tough read. Jim Harrison said, "You want to push the heroine off the nearest cliff."
Yeah,
And I probably did it sometimes too.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the new book, part of the story is centered around this salt excavation company called Exportadora de Sal. That's the real name, but you changed the name in the book, obviously. So I assume this is based on real events.
Yes. ESSA, as they're known, back in the mid 1990s, they owned the largest salt works in the world. It was Mitsubishi owned 49%, and the government of Mexico owned 51%. Um, and the salt works depends upon, seawater evaporation. And so they have these big salt pans, 75 square miles of salt pans at a little town that in 1954 was just a fishing village. But when this shipping magnate from America came and started a salt works there, it became the largest salt works in the world. And ESSA wanted to expand their operation south into the only remaining lagoon that was still pristine where the California gray whale breeds and gives birth. And they made this proposal literally 1 month after the California gray whale was removed from the endangered species list. One,
Uh,
1 month.
yeah, so
It's
that was not a coincidence.
no, it's so dark.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, and this was the reason this was partly very an attractive plot thread for me was that it was the very first time that the entire world scientists, politicians, celebrities, all of the environmental agencies like NRDC, World Wildlife Fund, all these people all got involved in this because
mm,
there's nothing in a way sexier than a whale. And it really attracted everybody's attention. And you could all of a sudden, people began to realize that these environmental crises are not confined to nations. They don't respect borders. They're international problems. And so it was a really exciting time to say get involved and say the Earth is a one single ecosystem, and we have to take a stand here. And that's what happened. We did.
right. So, do you know if is it still an ongoing issue, or did that kind of put an end to
Yeah,
it?
that put the end to it. And Laguna San Laguna San Ignacio, which is the one south of Guerrero Negro where they wanted to expand, is now a UNESCO something site. So
Mm,
it probably will never be compromised.
mm,
Um,
that's good.
yeah, it was exciting to have a early win.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing that you do in this book is you weave in this family story, which I assume is entirely fictional, or is that based on someone else, or?
I mean, I do have a twin brother, and I was always interested in the unique dynamic that being a twin presents to the twins themselves,
Right,
because you start out at the same place, and there's this interesting quality of both identification, protection, balance, being exquisitely fair that develops instantly.
right,
Um, the tragedy that happens between these two is fictional.
right.
But I always was interested. I have three friends who are all twins, and one of them is a writer actually, and we've all been threatening to who's going to write the twin book, and so far I beat everybody to
You
it.
won.
I won.
Yeah. Well, one
Yeah.
of the things I really loved about this book was the fact that, there is this tragedy, and one of the twins is actually responsible for what happens, and they're both really young when it happens, but it basically rules the rest of their lives together, but in such an understated way, like nobody ever talks about it, but it's always there. And one of the things that I loved is that they both have guilt about it, even though one of them wasn't responsible. Um, and you capture that so well, in fact, that I kept forgetting which one was the one that was responsible. So I love the way that you kept. I mean, this is something you've always been good at, is um, presenting family dynamics without beating the reader over the head with it. It's all very understated, but it's always just so present, so that when they finally reach the point where the two of them are sort of forced to actually have a conversation about this, it's a really powerful moment.
From a payphone in Baja.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. I mean it's the beauty and the problem, the gift and the problem of being a twin is that the bad things that happen that your twin does, you want to actually protect them from what they've done,
right.
and so that protection takes on the form of collaborating in the guilt in some way.
Mm,
And it's a really nuanced problem, but and then as you said earlier to me, that the guilt isn't just between the two twins. The entire family conspires to deal with this in all these nuanced forms of denial. I didn't really know what the theme of this book was until I was about two-thirds of the way through it and realize, oh, what I'm really talking about here is guilt. What I'm really exploring is especially unwarranted guilt. We all have some guilt that we come by honestly, but I was really interested in how unwarranted guilt can warp whole lives and families and our own perceptions of ourself. And I would bet that everybody walking on this planet walks around with unwarranted guilt.
yeah,
It,
yeah. It is a universal theme, but of course the fact that they're twins sort of takes it to a whole nother level. And of course, the other thing that's interesting is that they're such different personalities too, which is probably common, right? So even though
very.
they're not identical, they're very similar looking, and but they have just such variant personalities.
Yeah. Well, that's also very typical of twins, is that in order not to in order to maintain a healthy relationship with each other, they have to be, they have to stake out separate territories, so that they're not competing with each other. And
Right,
it's especially true with identical twins. These are what's called near identical twins. It's a
right.
new category of twin that they've now, or about 30 years ago, they began to realize, oh, there are some twins who share 75% of their DNA, and
Mm.
that's what these two girls have. Yeah.
So how did you decide to have Claire and her boyfriend or husband, I can't remember which he was at the time, but Mason, uh, be involved in this salt? Um, he's a photographer, so he goes down to investigate.
Yeah, well, he's a photojournalist working for National Geographic, and
Right.
she's a botanist. And one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to get them together, lost in another country. I
Ah.
wanted that quality of lost awayness that that can happen when you're at crises points in your life, and you go to another country, and all of a sudden, um, the normal rules that you abide by for yourself and for your relationships start to shred a little bit. So I wanted to get them in another country, and that meant I had to give them jobs that would take them to other
Mm.
countries. And I had always Paige, my husband, was working on a book years ago called Islands of the West with the nature photographer Franz Lanting. And we went down to Baja because one of the islands was Cedros Island, which is right off the coast where those big salt tankers come in, because it's a deep water harbor, and these big
Mm.
ships from Japan can come in and take the salt away. I just remember being down there and having that feeling of being lost in another country, and it was very rough. Baja was very rough in the mid 1990s. There was no Cabo San Lucas. It was just a village, and Guerrero Negro was a fishing. There was nothing there. It was pretty rough. And so how when you encounter something in your life, if you're a writer, that content, that material, that raw material is just sort of lurking in the shadows, and that something will bring it back out and unite it with other stories that you want to create together, to weave some sort of plot fabric. So that's how that happened.
Mm.
That's how I first got into that. And a lot of what happens with characters is that you need to give them certain kinds of jobs to get them into the settings you want, but you
Yeah.
also have to give them the freedom to move around. It would be hard to write this same kind of story if the main character was a shoe salesman in Manhattan.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's interesting about that dynamic between those two is that because his pursuit of this story is so intense. Not only are they lost, but he's so driven to get the photos, and so he kind of becomes inaccessible emotionally. So there's all this tension going on between the two of them, and not only that, but it becomes clear eventually that some of the locals aren't too happy about him taking photos. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's this ongoing sense of dramatic tension between them and around them.
I think, well, they're at crossroads in terms of deciding. She is at a
Yeah.
in terms of deciding whether she can stay with this guy. And so one of the other topics, lines of inquiry in the book is just how inexplicable love can be.
Mm-hmm.
And, and just sort of the wonderment of love. And it's sort of reaffirmation of that inexplicable feeling that, contrary to all good advice, you're just not going to walk away from.
Right. Yeah, you explore that really well. I also love the fact that you set part of the story in wine country, where the parents have a vineyard, wine company, and you are a sommelier, right?
I'm not a master sommelier, but I was in the international wine business for about a dozen years in a former incarnation.
Yeah.
And it was discovered when I went to France to study that I have a freakishly good palate. And um,
You've always said that about you.
what, who said that?
I've always said that about you.
Yeah. It's known as having an organoleptic palate.
Oh,
So,
really? There's a
yes,
term for it.
there is a word for it. Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, that is a huge well, a deep well of raw material that I knew I wanted to use in some book. And so here it surfaced in this one. I actually had another novel planned some years ago called Brothers of Providence. And I ended up not writing it, but that was going to be my wine book. And anyway, all my
Mm.
wine experience got cannibalized for the early part of this novel instead.
Well,
Yeah.
it worked out well. Um, so did you know you wanted to be a writer before you met Paige and Wally?
Oh, God, yeah. Um, After being in the orphanage, I was then put in a boarding school and in California. And basically, I spent most of my life in institutions, and institutions are pretty lonely places. And there's certain qualities that people who grew up in institutions acquire. One of them is a deep understanding of anonymity, where
Mm,
you're never more important than what's important for the group. And sometime when I was about 10 years old, somebody gave me one of those little key diaries
oh,
and
yeah.
for my birthday. And I started writing in it. And then it was just a great way for me to try to make sense of the world around me. I didn't have parents that I saw regularly. I only saw them on weekends and holidays. That's how I asked questions. It was how I worked things out. And after a while, if you write every day, you acquire a knack for writing, and you start building a vocabulary, and you start understanding the the architecture of a story,
Mm,
and subtracting what's dispensable, and rearranging what's indispensable so that you can find something that means something there.
mm, yeah.
So no, this has been a lifelong thing. I remember a couple of years ago I ran into the manager of a restaurant where I waitressed at when I was 19 years old.
Mm.
And he said, well, two things I remember about you, that all you wanted to do was write, and you were trying to learn how to swear. And it's true. I was really desperately trying to teach myself to swear and as well as write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to be pretty good at both, right?
Damn straight.
So far, how far along were you in the process when you met Paige as far
Uh,
as becoming a writer?
I met him, I met him at the University of California when I was a student.
Okay.
And after I graduated, I got a fellowship to Squaw Valley Writers Conference, or Community of Writers, or whatever it's called. And it happens that Paige had a good friend who ran that program.
Mm,
And he had heard that I had gotten a fellowship, and he called me up and said, I hear you're going to Squaw Valley. Would you mind taking this big stack of books up to um, Oakley Hall? And I said, sure. And he came over with this big stack of books for me to take up to Tahoe. And my roommate made him one too many Irish coffees. And, and that was the beginning.
ah. So
Yeah.
were you familiar with Wally before you met Paige?
No,
Oh, really?
I was a real, as I said, I was clueless. I mean, I was a huge reader. I read books my entire life, to the point where my mother asked me one day if I'd swallowed a dictionary. But I had never read any of Wallace Stegner or Paige Stegner. I
Mm.
just didn't, I had no idea. Yeah.
So once you did become close to him, and one of the things I've always loved about knowing you is that you just adored him, Wallace. Was he someone who liked to talk to you about writing and give you suggestions, or was it something that just kind of happened organically, or did you guys avoid the topic, or what?
No, I mean, we didn't have dinner time conversations
Yeah,
about the elements of narration.
sure,
But
right.
I can tell you, when I finished my first novel, I gave it to him to read. And in that draft, it had an epigraph, which was a poem from Nabokov, believe it or not,
Mm,
um, which begins, I was the shadow of the wax wing slain by the false azure in the window pane, and goes on from there. Anyway, Wally read the manuscript, and he wrote me a letter that began, Dear Waxwing. And
mm,
the basically I needed to change the point of view. The point of view was first person, and he said, you've got to put it into third person. And
mm,
he was totally right. And I learned so much about narrative point of view and how significant, how powerful, and how essential it is to every other aspect of writing a book. And I learned that all from Wally. Who tells the story and why are they telling the
mm,
story?
right.
And, if you're really close to the material, put it into third person. If you're if you're writing about somebody who you have nothing in common with, put it into first person so you get as
Mm,
close to them as possible. And writing the point of view determines what the content is, what the narrative tone is, what the narrative voice is. It determines everything, and it's the very first decision you make, and sometimes you have to change that choice.
right.
It really only took me a couple of months to recast the whole novel
Mm,
in third person, so it's not that big a deal. Um,
right.
it's a good idea to impose some distance between yourself and the material sometimes, and that's what putting something in third person will do.
Right. Right. So was that Undertow?
That was Undertow,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's a first novel. First novels tend to be autobiographical because you've got all this stuff in the way and you want to write it out of your way. And
Hmm.
I see that in my students.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell the story about when you first submitted that book and you used a different name.
Yeah. Um, I was worried that if I sent it out under the name Lynn Stegner, that publishers might worry or suspect that I was hoping for a shirt tail publication. At the same time, obversely, I was worried that if I sent it out under Lynn Stegner, I worried that they'd hold the work to a much higher literary standard than
Mm,
I had. So there were two really opposing but valid reasons why I was worried about my last name. So I sent it out just under my first name and my middle name, which is Marie, because Marie is actually a surname in
mm,
Europe.
sure.
Can
Yeah.
And anyway, the publisher that wanted to publish it said, we love the book. We want to publish it. We're just a little worried about your name because it sounds like a romance writer. Would you be willing to change your name? And I said, well, that's kind of funny because it's really not my name. My name is Lynn Stegner. And and then they were thrilled because they got something they didn't even know they were going to get. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's how that happened.
I love that story. Yeah. That's so funny. I think I've covered all the questions I had written down. Is there anything you wanted me to ask?
No.
Seriously? Yeah.
Well, most people ask, what are you working on now?
Yeah. And I
Here's a
know you're
question.
not working on anything, so.
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to work on something and then I got cold feet.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah,
Yeah.
it, I was thinking about actually writing a kind of memoir. And
Mm,
I thought, well, I've borrowed bits and pieces from my life and thrown it into lots of books already. And anyway, I'm not that fond of talking. I'd much rather talk about myself through other characters
ah,
or, or to sort of explore things through characters. So I abandoned that book and now
mm.
I'm going to be working on a book about narrative elements, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
So
just a little chat book.
have you enjoyed teaching? You've been at
Yeah,
it for a while now.
yeah, I love it, but not too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
In
never have
small
taught,
doses.
well, 2 classes a year. is what I have been doing. But the last 2 years, I've only taught one course a year, a
Mm,
novel writing course at Stanford. And otherwise, it just starts to take that same energy that you use for your books.
yes, right.
Yeah. Are you teaching?
No, I have been off and on, usually workshops with people that are that I've worked with off and on for years.
Yeah.
I have this little following of people that are working on long pieces, novels and
Yeah.
nonfiction books. So yeah, that's been fun actually. Yeah,
It keeps you in the conversation.
absolutely. Yeah, you're not
And
working in
also
a
you
big.
learn how to articulate, or you figure out, you dope out how to articulate problems that you encountered in your own work. Because every book is different and every book presents different problems,
Mm,
story problems. And I find it really helpful to see some of those things show up in other people's work, then I can figure out how to avoid it.
right. So one thing I've been asking most of the people that appear on this is, what is our job in today's world with everything being pretty chaotic right now? How do you see, especially, and with the arts being cut and so much like just blatant disrespect for the arts? How do you see our job?
Well, there may be, institutional disrespect or political disrespect for the arts.
Yeah.
And by disrespect, I mean just not funding it. But I don't think the need to tell a story is ever going to leave our species. I mean, it's essential to who we are. It's essential to how we figure out what to do, what this means, how to go on, how to not go on, how to give up, how to keep trying. It's how we answer questions and how we answer, choices, how we make choices. So I just can't ever see stories ever going away. And because we're a language-based species as well, it's not all going to end up in film. It's not all
Right.
going to be visual. We really need, the only thing that I've seen happen is that the attention span of the reading public has diminished. It's just
Mm.
shorter. I mean, I'm in the middle of reading the new Booker Prize winner, and you could read that book in 3.5 hours.
Oh,
It's
wow.
it's really spare and
Mm.
almost simple seeming.
Mm.
So the other thing is that if you look at how books were published in the late 19th century, um, what's happened now, you've heard of these collaborative publishers now where somebody will pay a publisher to design and
Yeah.
print. Yeah. Um, what else? There's another word for them. I can't remember what it is. But that's the way books were published back in the 19th
Mm.
century. The Byron went and had paid out money to have his books of poems printed. That's
Wow.
how that's how Don Juan was published.
Mm.
So we've just kind of come back around to this same process where the writer has to be involved in producing the book, or sometimes has to be, not always. But a lot of, especially literary fiction, is ending up in that kind of, that conduit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what happened with my most recent book. So I know
Yeah.
what you're saying. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's a viable option. And there's some really good places now are making really beautiful books.
Yeah, for sure. Good answer. Well, thank you so much. It's really good to talk to you again.
It's great talking with you, Russell, and
Yeah.
I love your steadfastness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for joining me for this episode of The Song of Roland, a podcast about American culture. I want to thank Lynn Stegner, my good friend, for joining me today for the podcast. I'd also like to thank Stephen Gillis of Dzonk Books for sponsoring this podcast, and I want to thank Tiffany Hauk for her wonderful production skills, and I would like to thank my son Fletcher for his musical contributions. Join me again next time for another episode of The Song of Roland.